What is the difference between over-explaining and oversharing? Many times I hear people confusing these two terms. I over-explain and I overshare, they say. Or they mix and they want to say over-explain, but they say overshare. There is an overlap. However, there are some distinctive differences between these two terms. Let's see what it is so that we can understand what it is that we're doing and how we can be more aware of our behavior. Let's start with a short definition of each one of them. Over-explaining means that we are describing something to an excessive degree, and the feeling behind this description is usually guilt. We are over-apologetic. We want to make sure that the other person understood our point, and we over-explain our point because we think that there must be something that we're not saying right, or there must be something that we're saying and it's going to hurt the other person. Explaining is not over-explaining. Explaining well is not over-explaining. Let's not confuse these two, because sometimes people say, what's wrong in explaining something very well? Well, there's nothing wrong. It's one thing if you're explaining well and you are adding details to what you want to say, but over-explaining has this feeling of fear and guilt behind it. You are feeling that you're doing something wrong. That's why you are putting more details. It's something different than the informative explaining well, right? So let's get that straight. While the oversharing is the disclosure of an inappropriate amount of information, a detail about you and your personal life. Again, disclosure of an inappropriate amount of information and details about you and your personal life, which means that you're sharing too much with somebody maybe that you haven't established a relationship that you can share that much. There's nothing wrong in sharing a lot about your life and your personal experience. But sometimes we're doing it too early, we're doing it to the wrong person, we're doing it at the wrong timing. So all these defines the oversharing. Anything that has the over in front of it, it has an excessive amount of doing something. So what's the common thing between oversharing and over-explaining is they both fall under the territory of boundaries. There's also a difference there, but I will explain later. They both fall under the territories of boundaries. We are doing something with our boundaries or with the other person's boundaries. And they both fall under the response, the coping mechanism, the trauma response of fawning. Fawning is the trauma response that has to do with the pleasing other people, with meeting other people's needs, with prioritizing other people's needs and feelings. So both over-explaining and oversharing has to do with the fawning coping mechanism or trauma response. Let me go back into what I said about boundaries. So there is something about boundaries happening in both of these coping mechanisms. However, there's a very important difference here. Over-explaining means that you're protecting your boundaries. You're protecting your boundaries when they have been crossed by somebody else, for example, and you're over-explaining your boundaries. And you say, next time, I don't want to pick up the phone during the weekend for work-related issues, and I want to be with my family because, my family is very important, and because, my son was sick the other day, and I want to take... So you're over-explaining it because you're adding more details to something that is perfectly normal. I'm sorry, I'm not picking up the phone for work-related issues on weekends. And you're over-explaining it because you're feeling guilty that if I say no to work-related issues, what if my manager is disappointed with me or my colleagues don't like me anymore? So all these things, feeling guilty, feeling scared, and that's why we're over-explaining, but actually we're over-explaining normal and healthy boundaries. So you see, over-explaining has to do with defending and standing up for your boundaries. Oversharing, though, has to do with crossing somebody else's boundaries. When you're sharing too much information, too many details about you, your personal experiences, your emotional background and childhood traumas, etc., to a person that you just met, you're crossing their boundaries at that moment. So you see, both are about boundaries, but one is defending our boundaries and the other one is about crossing somebody else's boundaries. We're sharing too soon. We're crossing somebody's boundaries that they're not ready to listen to that. They didn't consent to listen to that. They were not even asked to listen to what you're sharing at the moment. They don't even have the time to listen to what you're sharing at that moment. So that's why we call it oversharing. And as we said, they both have to do with maybe an emotional experience in the past. Maybe we didn't learn. What are the boundaries? It's also coming from a place of emotional deprivation. We were not feeling heard at some point in the past, maybe in our childhood or maybe in a previous relationship. And now there's an abundance, there's an accumulated amount of information that we want to share. Emotional deprivation leads to, of course, emotional oversharing or overexplaining from one excessive extreme to the other. So it makes sense, I get it, but we're here in order to understand how we can find a more balanced way in order to share with others. Specifically about the over-explaining, I said that it stems from childhood experiences or past relationships. And let me make that even more specific. If you have been gaslit, which means that if you have been in a relationship where your parent or your partner has been distorted your words or has diminished or invalidated your feelings or has said that maybe you're too much or maybe you're reading too much into that, it makes sense why you might feel that your feelings are not valid. And for some people, when they have been made to feel that their feelings are not valid, for some people they just hide them forever and they don't share and they become what we call the avoiders. And for some other people, it comes out as an over explanation. Okay, I know my feelings are not valid, but let me put another 10 sentences in there so that maybe I can validate them. So if you have been gaslit, if you have been in a relationship where your words has been distorted, your feelings are being dismissed, it makes sense why you are over explaining. And it makes sense that you're trying so hard so that you can try to avoid having your words again distorted or your feelings being dismissed again. If also you have been made to feel that everything is your fault. So here comes the guilt feeling that we said before. If you have been held responsible for other people's emotions, or angry people have been always accusing you for things that were not actually within your control, it makes sense why you're over explaining so that you can push back some of the blame that you know that probably is coming towards your side. That's the function of over explaining. See, we have first to understand and normalize our coping mechanisms so that we can eventually reverse them. So yes, if you have been made to think that everything is your fault, it makes sense why you over explain. And it makes sense why you over apologize, because you feel guilty already before somebody holds you accountable for something, right? You over apologize before somebody says that they were hurt, if they were hurt. About the oversharing, let's see a little bit of the function of the oversharing. You're sharing too much information about your life, and it makes sense if you have felt lonely many times in your life. Oversharing means that I invite other people to get to know me. And by getting to know me, they connect with me. So the need behind the oversharing is connection. I want people to connect with me. I want people to understand me. I desperately want people to come closer to me. So there's the need for connection, need for sympathy and empathy. I want people to understand what I've gone through. Nobody has understood what I've gone through. So again, it's stemming from the emotional deprivation or from being in an emotionally unsafe environment where people didn't understand us. The need for validation. We haven't been validated. Actually, we have been dismissed very often. And that's why now we overshare. For some other people, the oversharing can also be a way to test the relationship. When you have been hurt many times in relationships, starting with childhood or adult relationships, when you have been hurt many times, it makes sense, again, if sometimes you think that before I commit, before I invest, before I connect with that person, let me push the relationship to the boundaries, to its limits, so that I can see whether this person is here to stay. I'm not putting myself into this risk again of getting hurt. First, I want to test. So you're sharing as much information as possible with the other person so that you can see whether they will push you back, whether they will be disgusted or annoyed or disconnected with you. And if they don't, then that's good proof that maybe they're here to stay. Even though logically it makes sense, it also makes sense why people don't know that this is your experience, this is where you're coming from. And it makes sense also why they do push you away. They don't do it in purpose. They don't know that you have been hurt, but they are also protecting their boundaries, and they also want to be in a relationship where their boundaries are respected. So yes, for some people it can be a way to test the relationship, but at the same time, they're signing up for more hurt at the same time. And another function of oversharing is to show your true self. You want to be authentic. You don't want to hide anything. And that's perfect. That's fantastic. That's what we want to achieve in our relationships. And again, at the same time, sometimes we're doing it too soon. Relationships grow in a slow pace. We need to gain trust first. We need to test our boundaries. We need to understand each other first. And it goes really slowly. Especially the older we are, the more hurt we are from relationships and the slower we go into new relationships. So it's a great thing that you want to be authentic and your real self with relationships, but at the same time, get feedback from what the other person is sending you, the messages that the other person is sending you. There's another video that I also explain, I hope not over explain. I explain the over explaining response. Of course, have a look at it. If you want to start working on the oversharing and the over-explaining, because I heard so many people that they are struggling with that and they want to find this healthy medium, have a look at the course that I have in the Academy, Setting Boundaries, Taking Control of Your Life. I explain everything about the boundaries, and you will see 6 different types of boundaries that we have no idea of. And you will also see my step-by-step guide how to understand, to formulate, and then to express your boundaries step by step. Have a look at the course. It's a great help in order to bring this healthy balance in your relationship. And of course, don't forget, before you say anything, breathe. That sends a message to our brain that we are safe. We are not scared. It's okay who we are. We are enough. Breathe. That will help you regulate your feelings and your thoughts so that you can have a healthy balance of rational decisions and understanding and awareness of your feelings. Breathe in order to self-regulate. That's the first thing that you can do, you can take from this video today. I hope it was helpful. Let me know your questions. Let me know your experience. I know that boundaries, I know that over-explaining and oversharing is a very important micro skill that we all need in relationships. So let me know your questions. I'm here for you. For any more ideas and articles and tips and advice and insights on mental health and relationship, have a look at the other videos here on YouTube or at AntiLoneliness.com. Have a nice day and take good care of yourself.